This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
Hello and welcome to the Unstoppable Indians. Every week we take a journey into the life of an outstanding Indian, a person whose talent, acumen or moral example is transforming India. The best, the finest from every field join me, Manvi Dhillon, on this show to share their life story, their journey to success, some of the knocks along the way, what made them get up and keep going, what makes them an unstoppable Indian. My guest today is the Managing Director and CEO and Chief Architect, if I may say that, of the National Stock Exchange, Ravi Narain. It's only 15 years old, but the National Stock Exchange has transformed stock trading in India. It ended the outcry system, brought transparency into trades, increased efficiency, and introduced a whole host of new products. All of this meant a dramatic increase in volumes. From day one, this man, Ravi Narain, has been at the heart of NSE's moves. He was part of a small team handpicked to create the National Stock Exchange in the early 90s. Today, as its Managing Director and CEO, he is proud of the NSE's achievements. A nationwide trading net, a computerized depository, new instruments of trade, and yet he's conscious of the unfinished agenda. Mr. Narain, thank you very much for joining me on the Unstoppable Indians. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
An economist from Cambridge, an MBA from Wharton, good job in Washington, and you chose to head back to India 30 years ago to join the IDBI. I've got a very simple question. Why?
Well, I was in some ways brought up to believe two things: that it's very important to contribute to something meaningful in India, and that it was important to try and do something which had an impact beyond a particular organization. So some sort of a policy level impact should be as much a part and parcel of your job as the day job, so to speak. And while the job in Washington was quite interesting and a huge learning experience, but all said and done, it wasn't allowing me to get a feel for what India's issues were. So it was fairly important to come back. It was just a timing issue, actually.
You spent a considerable number of years at IDBI, and then in the early 90s you were invited to be a part of the core team that would set up the National Stock Exchange. What was your response to that invitation? What went through your mind?
Oh, what a fun thing to do. I mean, we were constantly, the good thing about IDBI was that it provides a huge canvas to experiment, especially where institution building was concerned. And here was IDBI saying, well, there seems to be a huge need to set up a brand new exchange. Do you want to try and do something like that? And I thought, my God, I have no idea what an exchange does. So what could be more fun than figuring this out?
So how did you figure it out? Because as you said yourself, you know, it's not like you knew everything about exchanges.
Nothing, actually. Well, it makes life a lot easier in some ways, because you have a clean slate. So like everything else where you start to learn, you travel, you talk to people, you talk to industry constituents, and we did all of that. And I personally tried and traveled to as many exchanges as I could outside India as well, in addition to talking to people in India, and tried to figure out how these things work.
And in the process, the realization that you also had to be a sort of IT evangelist to set up the National Stock Exchange must have dawned upon you.
Well, yes, it was very important to figure out rather quickly that opacity was a key issue in the Indian exchanges. They were just not open and transparent, and they were not hugely efficient because they were physical locations. And the only way to solve this problem was technology. And I have this lovely story, you know, when we started doing this and started talking to people about how IT technology should be brought in to change the face of this industry, people laughed and said, you know, you're not from an exchange world, and exchanges are not about technology, they're about people. And I used to love saying, well, I think we understand that, but technology allows people to do things a little differently. So it was great fun.
there must have been critics, skeptics rather. Skeptics is the right word. But I think perhaps India and those skeptics didn't really realize the role that technology could play and how it could transform things.
Not in this industry. They actually wrote us off quite a bit. They think it was somebody dabbling in something new, that exchanges were 100 years old, and you can't really attack that sort of entrenched institution by something called technology. So yes, people did write us off, and I think that made our life easier actually.
You know, it's easy to forget how NSE changed the rules of the game, even though it's fairly recent. I want you to go back, rewind over these years, and they're not that many years, and think of all the firsts that completely changed the landscape for India.
I think there were 3 or 4 key firsts. I think the first was the notion that you have to give away the physical floor, that it has to be a virtual floor. And if we want every investor in India, irrespective of location, to not feel shortchanged, then the only way to do this is to say my floor is my screen, because then everyone in India sees the same thing. So that was, I think, one key first, that my exchange floor is going to be the screen, the computer screen. I think the second first was, how do you get that screen all over India simultaneously? How do I see it the same as somebody in Bihar or somebody in Karaikuri down south? And that was even a more intricate challenge for us, because at that time, unlike today, there was no telecom revolution. We figured out that to pull one terrestrial line through Bombay would take us 6 months. And so we thought, okay, we have to become a telecom company first, and it has to be satellite, it has to be wireless, it can't be physical. So that was, I think, a second first. I think the third first was even more interesting in some ways. We decided that we would not sell seats in an exchange, because till then the ruling notion was that you, in a sense, engendered a shortage of seats, and then you auction them off, and the higher the price of a seat for a broker on the exchange, the greater the value of the exchange. And we said this is complete nonsense, because member brokers of this industry must be professionals, like a doctor or a lawyer. You know, you don't auction off a doctor or a lawyer's seat. So we said we're going to create a membership, and you come in, you pay us a deposit, and you want to walk out, you take your check back, and you're gone. There is no seat concept. So that was a very interesting third. I think the fourth notion we came up with is that we must create rules which must be made transparent to the market, because there was this huge notion that if I played golf with you, I would be able to handle a different set of rules than if I didn't. And it was very important to bring confidence to that. You know, large, small, Bombay, upcountry, black, white, same rules had to apply. So there were 5 or 6 such rules.
You know, once you had the core of the NSE in place, there was still a number of to-dos on your list. You know, a computerized depository, broker certification, internet trading, derivatives. And you know, when I look back over the last 10 years, there's so much headway being made on all of those fronts. What I need to understand is that today on Ravi Narain's to-do list, what's sitting right up there?
Surprisingly, it's a very long list even today. If we benchmark ourselves globally, while the infrastructure is now benchmarked very well globally, the kind of product range, the kind of segments, the depth of the market are still, we have a very long way to go. So to give you an example, I think India's done well on equities and equity derivatives. Where we haven't done well is other asset classes, is other segments. Currency futures have just begun a few months ago.
Absolutely.
Interest rate, and we have a very long way to go. It's one currency pair, US dollar, Indian rupee. We have to do more. We're just doing currency futures. We haven't started currency options. Even today, non-resident Indians and foreigners are not permitted to participate in the currency segment. So currency segment should be $10–15 billion a day market. It's still $500 million a day, which is good progress, but we have a long way to go. And given the kind of currency volatility that every business, every individual, every family faces today, it's imperative that we grow this market. Similarly, the interest rate risk. Today, it's important that we have a similar product range where I can hedge my interest rate risk. So there are no interest rate futures, there are no interest rate options. We have to do something about that. A specialized platform for small and medium enterprises. The real dynamism and entrepreneurship in Indian industry actually lies in the hundreds of thousands of small enterprises in India. They have huge trouble accessing capital, whether it's equity or debt capital. Obviously, the same platform doesn't work too well. We have to create that. So on and on and on, it just goes on.
You know, if you take a step back from all of these areas and just say, well, you know, I know that this work needs to be done. The question is, it takes a whole lot to get it moving, to create that depth, to create a safe, foolproof system around that product. So, you know, what is typically the cycle time every time you take a new product from the drawing board to the market?
The launch of the product can be reasonably swift.
But I'm looking at it through a larger...
Precisely. I think creating a market, growing that market, is a very slow process. And I think it's sad to quickly get something launched off. It doesn't quite work like that way. And frankly, we feel quite pleased that we can slowly build and grow that market. And I think that's the only way to grow a market. Otherwise, it's absolutely pointless, actually.
They say you're a perfectionist, and you know, once there's something up and running, you like to test it, put it through the stress that it needs to, make sure that it's foolproof. Do you agree that you're a perfectionist?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, it's obviously very important to keep going back and get it right. But perfectionist, I think we're all very far away from being a perfectionist. It's really about passion. If we believe in something, if you're passionate about getting something done, that's not quite a perfectionist, but it's very important to get that going. It's very important. And mind you, Manavi, I think in India, we are simply not growing and building markets. We're just building very quick businesses. We're just trying to extract value from, short-term value from businesses, and that disheartens me, actually.
So you'd actually say that on a scale of 1 to 10, when you look at the next 20 years, because you know you've had an exciting last 20. I mean, they've been satisfying, they've been exciting. You've seen the NSC and what it is. When you look at the next 20, are you on a scale of 1 to 10 more likely to be disappointed?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. I think one should not underestimate the journey ahead. I think India has to grow phenomenally, and we have a very important stake in building institutions. We're nowhere near done. It's unwise to think that we're close to done. But no, if we are clear that the institutions are to be built, that global benchmarks have to be, in a sense, completed, then there's no question of disappointment. We have to soldier on. We have to keep building institutions.
I read once a remark that you made that, you know, perhaps your biggest worry is that, am I vigilant enough? Is the NSC vigilant enough? Is that your primary worry?
Could I put it differently today? I think when the institution is younger and smaller, in some ways the stakes are smaller. As the institution grows, it becomes much more visible. I think two things happen. The stakes grow larger for the institution, for the country, and in some ways the attacks on it also grow larger. So on both counts, yes. In that sense, yes, it's a worry.